Welcome to another edition of the Student Life Advisors podcast. My name is Tré.
I'm Elaine.
And we are back with another special episode, something that is really pertinent right now, and we have a special guest. But before that, let's kind of set the stage first.
College costs has proven to be a top concern for students. They're really looking for the most affordable way to attend college, but typically they're still facing financial aid gaps.
So with this context in mind, we want to help answer this question, but we're going to do so with the help of a special guest. So let me introduce that guest first before we bring them into this conversation. Ken is a veteran and innovator in higher education finance with more than 25 years spent managing startups through Fortune 1000 companies, helping them create meaningful change and improvement in their delivery of financial services. Throughout his career, Ken has worked tirelessly to improve access to higher education, and he continues to be a passionate advocate for expanded financial literacy and transparency in the space. So with that being said, allow me to introduce our special guest, Chairman and CEO of Ascent Funding, Ken Ruggiero.
Excellent. Wow. That guy sounds like he's going to be fun to listen to.
Well, that's great. So, Ken, it's a pleasure to have you with us on this episode of the Student Life Advisors podcast. With Elaine setting the stage there, we kind of just want to jump right in with what's happening on the college costs right now. So with that being said, which aspects of the student experience do you think have been impacted by the college costs?
So one, I'm gonna sound like one of those old people to start that answer. And when I went to school, right, I went to school in the late 80s. And if you ask that question in the late 80s, you would have gotten a very different answer than the answer you get today. So you go back in time, and I'm going to take you way back to 1965. The Higher Education Act was authorized that said, hey, we need more people in college because we need them smarter so we can grow our economy here in the United States. We've got a lot of people who need to get educated, and we don't have the infrastructure or people aren't aware of the access. So they created grant programs, the Pell Grant, and over time, and the loan programs, formerly known or kind of currently known as the Stafford Loan Program. So going back to the 60s, 70s, and then 80s, you could get between a Pell Grant and a low-cost loan about 80 to 100% of your college costs covered. And that drove people going into college, which was awesome. The policy was actually working. Enrollments were up. Nobody was taking on enormous amounts of student loan debt. There was this loan called the Perkins loan, which some people still know, but the Perkins loan had risk share, right? The school would lend some money to the student and the government would match it. So there was controls in place, and that money got recycled. So the school wanted it back. So everything was working pretty well. So the answer to your question was you could go find yourself. Right? You could wander as an 18-year-old or a 28-year-old into a higher education program. You could get money. You could go move somewhere, test a different environment. You could try English, then astronomy, and then science, and then stay in college for at least 4 years, maybe 5 if you changed your major halfway through. And then you got a degree. Dropout rates were, not great, not as bad as they are today, and we'll get into that. But that was what college experience was supposed to do. The knowledge was imparted to you by professors. There was only one place to get knowledge. You had to go mostly to a residential campus. You had to buy a physical thing called a textbook. Most people don't really know what a textbook is these days, right? And then you had to sit in a classroom and learn from a guy who'd been learning and teaching for 20 to 30 years. And that was the way knowledge was delivered. So the experience that the cost has had is it's had a dramatic effect. So no one can afford, but the top 1 or 2% of all families in the country can afford, I'll put in air quotes, to go find themselves. That's just not really an option for the mass population that is trying to get educated so they can get into the workforce and get a better job. So that's sad, right? And we're going to talk about some of the reasons and some of the answers about how we can deal with that. And the other student experience that didn't exist was just the stress of making the right decision. I'll say I kind of forgot, like if, again, go to find yourself, if I made the wrong decision, I had time and I could go work like I did and work all summer and reload and go back to a different school. Well, a lot of families, it's kind of one and done. And so if you don't pick the right school, or you don't pick the right major, or you struggle with your academics or physical or mental health, like all of that can get you off sides and really off track forever completing your education. So that's sad. One of the ways we're at Ascent, one of the ways that we're helping is on some of our planning tools, so that people, when they get ready to make that first decision, right, they're looking at what kind of an experience do I want? What might a starting salary be? We have a Bright Futures engine that helps people kind of triangulate to, hey, this could be a really good answer or a really, really negative answer on the finance side.
Ken, I really appreciate all that context you put into it, because I think, especially over the last few years, I've been helping counsel families and students find their path, and we really focus on the cost. We focus on the money, we focus on the numbers, and unfortunately, the advice has turned into, make sure you have a clear line of where you want to go, and that's just unrealistic for a lot of 17 and 18-year-old students making these decisions. And then if you go the wrong way, there's going to be a cost associated, and you're going to have to get back on track, which then, could impact overall success. So I love all the context you just provided, because I think that's a huge part of the conversation that we don't think of right away, especially when we're dealing with the direct problems of paying for college, finding your way. And these are 17 or 18-year-old students when we're thinking of a traditional student. But obviously there's a lot of different types of programs that have really emerged out there. One I think is a fantastic way, especially for someone who maybe picked a path, maybe even worked the path for a few years and has decided, I'm not exactly sure if this is where I'm finding my fulfillment. Technology has caught up. Maybe I need to learn more skills because I haven't caught up. So things like boot camp programs have really started showing up. One of my really good friends, actually, she didn't leave her field respectively, I would say, but she realized working in social work, there was huge misses on some of the technology, on some of the resources and the places people could go and get help. They weren't attracting people through their websites. They couldn't find them, they couldn't get the information. So she signed up for one of these boot camp programs to still work in the same type of field, but now she's helping develop really helpful, easy to find websites that will get triggered, if you put in the right search information when you need help. So could you share a little bit about your feelings with some of these solutions or different alternatives to even the four-year degree to help students kind of find their way, or maybe make a small correction that they need to in their careers?
Yeah, it's a great point. I love the example that you use, because that happens very often. We lend to students going to coding boot camps, and the average age of the person borrowing money is 30 years old. And more than 50% of those people have bachelor's degrees. About 15% don't have a high school education. So those are just some numbers to just marinate with. Like, wow, you've got really highly educated folks, adult learners, and then you've got maybe struggled students that are finding their paths into a skills training program. When you price a customer, a student, family out of the market, I love the way some things work in the world. But in a capitalistic society, like, there's always a vacuum, and then it always gets filled with a problem. A problem that gets created gets very quickly filled. And what the boot camps, the rapid learning, have filled was something we've known about in higher education, really since it started, which was, it's really not an efficient way to learn, right? I mean, you go to school, you go to class a couple, 3 times a day, right? A couple, 3, 4 times a week. You get your weekends off, you have your nights off, you have your mornings off if you're really good at that calendaring. And again, I enjoyed it. I'm sure you all enjoyed it, but from a use of time perspective, it's not a really effective use of time. From a facilities perspective, like, summer's off, winter's off, right? Like, you've got all infrastructure that's only used 8 months out of the year, unless they can do summer camps and winter camps and whatnot. So boot camps have evolved to solve a very, very specific need across an ever increasing number of specific skills. The one that we're talking about that's most closely associated with boot camps are the coding boot camps. And they popped up because there was a massive gap in the workforce for skilled technical people, and a very specific, going back to the first boot camps from about 8 years ago, there were not enough full stack programmers to fill all of the full stack programming roles out there. So this whole industry popped up. They didn't need Pell Grants because they could get students through a non-accredited program, because their value proposition was only two things. And these are kind of obvious as I say them out loud, but they aren't so obvious in traditional Title IV. Thing one, rapid learning of a specific skill, and then evidence of evidence of proficiency in that skill. And then if you do that, we will get you a job. Not we'll help you write your resume, not we'll refresh your LinkedIn, we will help get you a job. So that was the value proposition. People who were like your friend were like, hey, I know I want to increase my my salary. I know I have ideas on where and how I want to do it. But I don't have 4 years or 2 years or nights and weekends for 6 years, right? I need something, whether it's online or on-prem. So this was the boot camps. I spent so much time working with them because I love the way they approach education and evidence of skill attainment. And as an employer, like we hire people out of boot camps because, one, we know we know the good ones, and we know the good ones that are producing the type of student or worker we need. So yeah, it's just like it's happened in education really since 1965. Every time there's a gap between the traditional education system and the workforce, learning programs pop up and fill that gap. And now it's being filled even more efficiently because you don't need a physical textbook, right? You don't need to get out of your house and go to a campus or live in a very tiny room with an uncomfortable bed, right? Like you can do it online. You can actually drive with some of these community college programs that are coming online. So yeah, big fan of boot camps. Big fan of reskilling and upskilling that's going on across the country right now.
And I think you brought up a lot of great points there, that boot camps are definitely a tool and a resource. And a lot of families typically may not even consider them, or it's one of those things that you're kind of thinking, if I'm going to go to school, I'm going to rely on financial aid, and typically a boot camp program wouldn't qualify. I don't think a lot of families out there know that's very specific qualifications to get the school qualified and then the program level qualified. Those schools out there, financial aid offices, I always have to give them a round of applause, because the amount of work, not only administering the aid, but making sure their programs qualify is a lot of work, because the rules and regulations from the Higher Education Act from 1965 are really, really specific, and it gets really granular. We have students who, boot camps, you do run into that problem where you likely will have a large financial aid gap because typically there are no financial aid options available. But even the 4-year degrees, we're seeing a lot of families, like you had mentioned before you could work a summer job and pay for your classes.
Yeah.
Now you work a summer job and maybe you can afford to get your meals. Maybe some textbooks, it depends on how much you're earning, how much you're working, and how much you saved. But typically students aren't able to, just quickly come up with the funds they need to pay for school. So we are still seeing a lot of financial aid gaps. So Ken, what are your thoughts about students facing financial aid gaps? What are some of those top considerations they should be thinking about, that they should be breaking down with their families or anyone helping them on their journey before they dive in or jump in? Because unfortunately, there's a lot of prep that goes into choosing a school these days.
I'm a finance guy, so I like my little finance jokes. So one of them is I like to say fear the average, right? And when you look at college cost, what you're seeing is these net price calculators. They're like, this is the average of someone who might look like your financial situation, your family situation. Here's your cost of attendance, and think about cost of attendance for just a second. Cost of attendance is tuition, kind of straightforward or not, right? The average price has been discounted by 50 to 56% right now, are the running numbers. So like, okay, well, I think I understand how much just the tuition piece is, but I'm not sure. So that's kind of confusing, but there's all sorts of that. And then they price room and board, right? Shelter and food, and that's an average. Like, do you eat frugally or expensively? Are you no roommates or 3 roommates? Are you going to live like kind of in the city if you've got a city-based campus, or are you going to live and have to commute? And then you've got like all the other fees that are existent. So when families, first thing I do is like, hey, you need a budget, and the budget needs to include all, pick the number, 4 years, 9 months if it's a boot camp, 2 years if it's community college, you're going for your associates, because you need to figure out what your cost of attendance is, because we've seen some schools who kind of come in with a low number because you could have 4 roommates, right?
You could.
One of the dirty secrets of math is both of my sons went to 4-year colleges, and my younger son went to University of San Francisco. The cost of attendance at University of San Francisco only includes 9 months of room and board. So I went to the landlords in San Francisco and said, hey, I only need a 9-month lease. And then I want to like not pay for the summer when my son's living with me in San Diego. And yeah, that didn't happen, right? So the cost of attendance is a 12-month lease, right? Schools that are in cities generally only have 1 year of on-campus housing, not even guaranteed anymore. So you are going into New York City or Boston or San Francisco, in my example, looking for a rental. And many people look at the cost of attendance, and it doesn't include summer rent. It doesn't include first and last month's rent and security deposit. So I say, hey, you really need to sort out kind of like how you want to live and how much you're going to spend. Once you have that number, it should influence your decision about where you can afford to go. And I see many families not go through something. What I just described to you is painful, right? If you're having that conversation with an 18-year-old or a 25-year-old or a 32-year-old partner of yours, like it's scary, it's hard. The internet is almost overwhelmed with data, and so, but we tell people, like, do the best you can, make the best guesses, write down your numbers, and look at it over the total cost of attendance, defined as the total cost of the degree you're seeking, and then joking, early and often fill out that FAFSA, right? So there's 2 things that people don't do. If you look at the FAFSA completion rates, they're horrible, right? They're absolutely horrible. In the lowest state last time I checked was Utah. Only 20% of the first-time freshmen going into college fill out the FAFSA in Utah. Best state, Tennessee, 65% fills out the FAFSA. Everybody should fill out the FAFSA. With this new income, the new IDR regulations that are going into place, like, even if you don't get a subsidized anything or a grant anything, like, you should be taking a federal loan, because if something not great happens to you, there's debt relief through the federal program that'll happen with these new 5% of your income tolerances. So second, scholarships. Literally billions of dollars a year go unclaimed. Edvisors knows this. You guys promote scholarships all over the place. You're like, how do I say free money any more than free money? Like, that should work, but people get tired. There's some bad actors, like there are all over the place, when students are hunting and desperate for money. But there's a lot of scholarships, and I don't think students and families and parents and partners and uncles and brothers and sisters spend enough time looking for those scholarships.
Thank you for making it to this point in the podcast. As you know, we bring you a bonus code with every episode. Use the bonus code Season 2 for 100 points that you can redeem on scholarshippoints.com. That's Season 2, SEASON, the number 2. Now let's get back to the podcast.
We give away scholarships. Some people just don't assume it's real. They don't necessarily think someone's really going to give me money. I filled that out. I forgot it was a quick scholarship. And we've had to track people down saying, we're trying to give you money.
Please take this money.
Take it before we have to, move on to the next person who's eligible.
Yeah.
But I think scholarships are always the thing that people wait a little too long or don't put a lot of effort into it until they're like, they hear a story from someone else saying, I got $30,000 worth of scholarships. And they're like, why didn't I put in the time? Why didn't I just do it?
And Ascent has scholarships too, and I think we work with you on some of those. And We have the same struggles. The very often they'll have a lot of energy as a freshman family, and then they'll be like, "Oh, I'm too busy," and then they realize they're $1,000 or $2,000 short. They're like, "How did that happen?" It's like, well, you did the work first, right? You had all that energy being a freshman, and then you just kind of like forgot about it sophomore summer when you should have been as aggressive as you were your freshman prep summer.
Yeah, we had a interview with a scholarship expert, I'd say, someone who's really popular on TikTok and was able to get tons of scholarship money. And one of the things she told us was exactly what you said. She got into college, but she continued to every semester while she was in college apply for more scholarships. She didn't let the fervor that she had as a high school student when everybody's talking about scholarships, she didn't let that die. And throughout college, she was able to continue to get a scholarship here, a scholarship there, and just fund herself throughout getting her 4-year degree. So I think you're 100% on point about you've got to keep that same energy that you have throughout high school, in college as well, when it comes to obtaining scholarships.
And in this current economic climate, we know people are really pinching every penny that they have. They're trying to make really smart decisions. And I think it's really important to remember, you might be really putting all that effort, like you said, into that freshman year, but there is one pattern we haven't really seen change much, whereas the second year of college might be a little bit more expensive than the first one was for a few reasons. Just normal, regular increase in costs at a college or university, and maybe a reduction in some of that first-time student aid. We are seeing a huge impact in that. And Ken, what are your thoughts on, a little bit of what you were elaborating on before, like keeping up with paying for college beyond that freshman year and even grad school? Graduate students still also need money to pay for school and college.
Well, there's a couple of things going on right now with college costs. One, they keep going up, right? And they're going up faster than the rate of inflation. We've all seen the headlines, and it's just kind of the way math works because of the way colleges are set up. They have to pay for facilities, increase pay for their professors and administrative staff. So so I guess I'll take you back. The schools have been struggling through the pandemic, right? We saw a lot of people get forced into their houses, forced out of school, forced into childcare, so they couldn't complete their education. So that put a lot more pressure on the finances of undergraduate and graduate programs alike. What we're seeing now is we're seeing enrollments up, which is great because that'll take some of the pressure off of the college admissions and the pricing. The odd thing about admissions right now, if I could just go there for a second, is it's so easy to apply for like literally dozens of schools. So it's become significantly more complicated for the schools themselves to understand who really wants to come to their college. And I don't envy them at all, because if you take like the number of applications showing up, which are at like an all-time high this past year, and then you add to it some of the stuff that's going on with the Supreme Court about how you're allowed to select and not select students for your class, and then you're not even sure if the students are going to show up. And like in some of these small liberal arts colleges, if they don't put like 250 students in the freshman class, they miss by 50 students. That's like $1 million, right? Like that's a lot of money to miss from a budget. So it's become increasingly hard for the schools and the students, everyone in this transaction. It's just gotten harder. So that just increases the cost of attending as well. The good news, there is good news. What happened during the pandemic, I think online learning accelerated 10 years. So everyone was doing it. Some people were doing it great. Some people weren't doing it great. Some universities were already filming a class online because they couldn't fit all the students into the auditorium, and you could just sit in your dorm room and watch the lecture, which is pretty cool. Well, all of that went to scale over the last 3 years. So whether it's more online accessible learning when you're literally on campus, or more online programs that are exclusive learning programs, and it takes different audio, video, curriculum, pedagogies of class structures testing, right? Like all of that has been, and all of that lowers the cost, right? Which is exciting because now we've said, the issue, Ascent started saying we just want to meet the student where they are, not where we want them to be, where they are financially, educationally, and take them to where they want to go, right? That's why we launched our success platform, because we realized they need more than money. And schools, the traditional schools, they didn't really want to meet students where they were, right? They're like, you need to meet us where we are, and we're over here. So you need to get in an airplane, a train, an automobile. You need to get yourself here, and then you need to show up at 9 o'clock because that's when this class is offered. So we've really seen, I won't say we've seen a sea of change in the traditional residential campus, but we've definitely seen a reorientation that's occurred in higher ed terms rapidly, not that rapidly, but rapidly, where the students have more access physically. From a time perspective, we become time unbound. From a skills perspective, so when we look at the economic climate, I like where we are, and that's with all the noise, I like where we are because, one, we have low unemployment, which means there's always demand for labor. Schools have gotten more efficient. The good ones have gotten more efficient with teaching and training and meeting students where they are, and employers have gotten more active, and that's been the missing link. If you go back in time and say, how much of an influence on higher education and higher education policy has the employment market had? I'll round down the beginning of this journey with zero, right? The employers were like, just give me someone with a bachelor's degree, I'll figure it out, right? Okay, you're almost an accountant, you're almost a nurse, you're almost an engineer. Now, I have a bachelor's degree. Yeah, you're almost, right? You're almost like ready to actually do work to be productive in this company, so in this occupation. So what we're seeing now is the employers are going, whoa. I now have to repay student loans, tax affected positively for all of us. I can put it in the 401k, right? Yes, the employers are being asked to start to repay student loans. And they're like, wait a second. So not only am I getting a person I have to train because I don't have the skills that I need, now you're asking me to pay for the education that delivered this human to my doorstep. So sorry, I can go on, I won't, but that's what's happening now, right? Like hospitals are saying, I'm not getting enough nurses, and I just want them trained on my systems in the way that we deliver care. And we're now watching schools go, we can do that. Like, we've known that all along, but we just kind of figured that was on you. But now let's integrate some of the way we're teaching these BSNs and get them ready to be workers, not ready to be workers. And something as sensitive as nurse, like, I think we all want a nurse not kind of learning on us, and it happens all the time. My son's a nurse, so I have a front row seat for all of this.
Yeah, that's good. So you kind of touched on some of it. So in the broader sense, what do you think the trends look like for college costs? Like, where are we going? I like what you were mentioning about how some colleges are now taking the roles that employees were saying, like, hey, we can train them while they're here for this time period. But yeah, where do you think we're moving as far as college trends and this whole conversation of just the college cost and access?
The cost in the pandemic has really altered the way everyone views getting an education, and it's been a convergence, quite honestly, and I think it's excellent. So where we're moving now is a bachelor's degree, which was considered the Wonka ticket to right to the happy life, the house, the 2 cars, right, and like it's lost its shine, and like the curtains come down, and we're like, okay, I don't need to leave my house to get smarter and get a job. I could, right? I don't need a bachelor's degree to prove to the labor market that I have skills that make me employable. So we're watching something called competency-based learning continue to pick up steam. There's a number of schools that have been pioneering competency-based education, self-paced learning for 20 years. And they've kind of been arguing with the Department of Education about what's a credit hour. And these schools are like, hey, if you prove you know how to like balance a balance sheet, you don't need to sit in a classroom for 3 months. Like, show us you know how to do debits and credits, and you get to take the next class. And I'm just using that as, again, I'm an accountant, a finance guy. It's kind of
Bring them on, bring them
balance
on.
sheets are supposed to balance, right? So like, don't sit there. Like, if you can get it done, move to the next skill. So we're seeing competency-based learning where it's proof of knowledge, not proof of memorization, but proof of knowledge, proof of skill. The other thing that we're seeing are credentials. Similar to that competency-based learning, you can break those down to actual credentials, and then you can make these credentials called stackable. So what's happening, and I think going to happen over time, is you can go shopping for your bachelor degree experience. And you don't have, and it could take you 4 to 6 years. And what you're doing is you're applying for new skills and stacking them up. So you're like, look, now I'm an associate's degree for accounting in my example. You're like, oh, how did you get that? Well, first I was a bookkeeper, and then I realized I like being a bookkeeper. So I took some classes. I proved that I knew how to make a balance sheet balance, right? I proved that I could understand taxes. And so now I've got an associate's degree in accountancy, and I just did that at nights and on the weekends. So I think between competency-based learning, which is really self-paced by design, and then credentialing, the students and employees are going to have proof of knowledge, not proof of completion of knowledge, and which is a bachelor's degree. So I'm excited about that because I think it shortens the time frame. Remember, I said earlier we have a low unemployment. Like the U.S. needs workers, right? We've got 10 million tech jobs right now that are open and been open, through the pandemic. The number's been higher. We've got another 10 million jobs that are open at any one time, non-tech. So, and we're not having a lot of babies in America right now. So demographically, we don't have a population of babies coming up to fill in the jobs for the boomers retiring, and we don't have immigration policy that allows new entrants of skilled labor the way we used to. So you're missing a labor force in the future. So having skilled people and not having them take 4 years off is what the employment market needs, and it's pulling now and demanding that skills get taught faster and cheaper, so they can get more productive in the workforce.
The world is changing.
It's changing really fast, and I love everything you brought up today. It's a lot of great information out there. There's a lot of context here where I think a lot of people thinking beyond the problem at hand, they can think of where we got, how we got here, where we're going, and I think some of your thoughts on where we're going are absolutely fantastic. Could you tell us a little bit more about Ascent funding and some of the tools and solutions? I know we've talked about a few here throughout this conversation, some great resources on the site to help you determine a place to go to college, but some of those resources available for students and families, and I guess that traditional and non-traditional student, because sometimes the non-traditional students, it's not that they're forgotten, but the information just isn't quite there for them like it would be for a traditional student.
Yeah, that's great, and thanks for giving me the public service announcement spot. So I'm a co-founder of Ascent, and I was a first-time learner back in the late '80s, right, bringing us back. And my parents both had high school education, second-generation Italians, and they said, "Hey, 3 sons, you're all going to college. You're all going to pay for it yourself." So when my kids were going to school, I was like, "Hey, what's the support look like for first-time learners out there?" There's 40% of all the students going into higher ed are first-time learners, and I knew about this economic problem about the cost of college, and sadly in 2015 timeframe, not a lot had changed since the 80s. Like there were a lot more of us, right? There were a lot more first-time learners. They still didn't want to fill out the FAFSA, which was a problem because my dad wouldn't fill out the FAFSA. I worked in his ice cream store. It was a cash business. He didn't want to fill out the FAFSA. He didn't want to fill out his tax returns, and he did. He surely wasn't going to give the balance sheet to the government and his kids. So that was a problem. And figuring out what major to pick and what school to go to was still a problem. It's easier now than it was back when I had to get the Peterson's Guide to Colleges out of the library, right? So Ascent was started to first, can we help first-time learners? Can we help people who don't have a co-signer, who've gotten halfway into a bachelor's program and ran out of money? So So all of what we do at Ascent is based off of predicting an outcome. And if we predict the outcome is going to be good for the student, we will invest in their success. And that's the way all of our products are based off of that premise. And so we will lend money to students who have a cosigner or don't have a cosigner if we think their outcome allows them to pay back the debts we gave them and all the other debts they took to get to where they found us. So in the traditional school, we've been able to help DACA students, international students, temporary protected status students, first-time learners. Our products are built, our student success platform, which helps them with academics and job search and physical mental wellness and time and budgeting. All of that is designed to help those first-time learners. And by the way, there's people who have plenty of family help and they have a 780 FICO, and we'll give them a loan to help them pay for school as well. But we didn't want to stop there because 40 million adult learners have some college credit and no degree. So that population of humans is significantly larger than the 20 million that are currently banging around higher ed. So we're like, we need to go figure out ways to help those. So we do a lot of lending in those coding boot camps we spoke about earlier. And we do those loans in even more sophisticated outcomes designs. So we look for the good schools. We have this tool on our website called the Boot Camp Finder. There's more than just coding boot camps in there. There's allied health, there's welding, linemen, truck driving. We find good schools that are graduating students at high rates and placing them at high rates and getting them jobs in the future that pay for that tuition in the present. In some of our most sophisticated programs, our loans don't become a loan until the student gets a job over $40,000 or $50,000. So we have, yeah. So now the student, the value proposition from the school, the boot camp is, hey, not only are we going to teach you something intense in 9 months, but if we don't get you a job, you don't have to pay for your tuition. Yes, you took a loan to pay for your tuition. We make it all disappear. No negative credit reporting, no collection calls. You bought something and you kind of returned it, right? Like I didn't get what you guys sold me 9 months ago or 10 months ago. So these are really revolutionary designs, but it puts everybody on the same page. That's why I love working with the boot camps, because they're really innovative. The school, one mission in life, get that student a good job. The student, one mission in life, get a good job, right? And then the lender, like we call it investing, because if we pick a good school and we help a good student, we're investing in their success, and we're kind of going to be with them for about 3 to 5 years in these cases, and we want to stay with them. That's why we created the student success platform. So check out the ascentfunding.com website. We've got our bootcamp finder for adult learners. We've got our Bright Futures engine for the bachelor's folks. And we've got a lot of saving tools. And we've got a bunch of other free benefits that you can get, and our scholarships are there. We run bigger scholarship programs in the summertime when students and families are looking for the most money.
Wow, I'm blown away.
I think that student success platform is really, really helpful, because you're helping not only that traditional family who's doing the counseling and working with other people in their same milestone. When you go outside of that traditional learner, you're looking for more of that competency-based learning. Sometimes you might be the only person doing that of the people you interact with. So those resources or bouncing off those ideas may not be as simple. So I think it's absolutely fantastic. So Ken, I cannot thank you enough.
Thank you very much. This was so helpful. So helpful. I think you provided so many insights. I'm sure you educated our listeners and even educated us as well. Just your knowledge about what's happening overall in the space regarding college costs. What are the solutions that are being proposed to help navigate that? And also what Ascent is doing to help individuals going through that right now. I mean, very creative, very innovative, I must say.
Thanks, Trey. Thanks, Elaine. It's great meeting you all, and I can talk, if you can't tell, on a lot of topics. I've listened to some of your work. I'll listen to more. I love what you guys are doing.
Yeah, we want to thank you for your time, being with us, and hopefully we can continue to have these conversations later in the future as well. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of Student Life Advisors Podcast. Once again, my name is Trey.
I'm Elaine.
And we will catch you next time with another conversation worthwhile just like this one.